The legal definition of torture is an act by which severe pain or suffering, whether physical or mental, it is intentionally inflicted on a person for such purposes as obtaining from him or a confession punishing him for an act, or a cruel, unusual punishment. Murder is the unlawful, premeditated killing of one human to another. In the case we will be discussing today, some may not think it is murder because they were not planning on killing her, just torture her. But with what they were doing to her, it is hard to believe they did not know they would eventually kill her. Moreover, some may ask why some would want to kill another human being. According to the Psychologization of Torture by Namisha Patel, it could be for many different reasons. One is that they get pleasure from it. They learn to dehumanize them, and it could also be from trauma like PTSD or any childhood trauma. Junko Furuta was a 16-year-old high school girl when this horrific incident occurred. She was a simple young woman, the daughter of a working woman. She was very loved by her classmates and neighbors. And unfortunately, on November 25th, 1988, she was kidnapped, tortured, raped, and murdered by 4 students from her high school. Hayashi Miyano, a boy who she rejected, decided to trick her and take her to a warehouse where he first raped her. He did this because he was in the Yakuza, an organized crime group, and did not like that no one rejected him. After this, however, he took her to a hotel and continued to rape her. He then called 4 of his friends to have their turn. That was when the boys decided to kidnap her and take her to Hiroshi's friend's house because they were having too much fun. While Furuta was held hostage, the boys decided to torture her. 100 members of the Yakuza raped her too. Per day, she would get raped by 12 men. These men would amuse themselves by inserting objects in her anus and vagina, including a bottle, an iron ball, scissors, a hot light bulb, roasting needles, grilled chicken skewers, and lit a firework. Moreover, they starved Junko and forced her to eat live cockroaches and drink her own urine. She was also hung and beaten with a bamboo stick, hit with an iron rod, and golf clubs. At the end, they burned her alive, where she unfortunately died. Junko Furuta's murder took place in 1988 through 1989 in Tokyo, Japan. Hiroshi first took Furuta to a warehouse on November 25th in 1988, where he first raped her and soon took her to his friend's house, Manyado's. She was held hostage for 44 days and tortured until she unfortunately died on January 4th, 1989.
So how many people were involved? For how many people were involved, there were 4 main captors, but there were other men who took part in torturing Junko. The other men were from the Yakuza gang, and there were said to be at least 100 of those men who took part in torturing her. The 4 main captors were Hiroshi Miyano. He was 18 years old, and he was the one who got rejected from Junko. Then there was his other 3 friends, which was Joe, later known as Kimisaku, who was also 18 years old. And then there was Nobuharu Shinji Minato at 16 years old, and lastly Yasushi Watanabe at 17 years old. Other people who can be considered as being involved would be Minato's parents, because they knew she was there and what was happening, but they were too afraid to say anything because they didn't want the Yakuza gang to retaliate on them, so they just tried to ignore what was happening to her when she'd yell and cry. So basically they just tried to turn a blind eye to her. For theory, so we learned about the social learning theory, which basically says that it's all about who you surround yourself with, and the behaviors we pick up from our interactions and experiences with other people. I found this quote from an article that kind of sums up what the theory means, and it says, attitudes, beliefs, values, and norms about certain behavior learned directly or indirectly from specific social groups, usually within intimate primary groups. So the article also brings up the theme of imitation, and it says that imitation refers to the emulation of certain behavior through the observation of role models. Sources of imitation usually come from family, peers, someone a person admires, has special or personal connections to, or even sources like the mass media. Imitation produces either prosocial or deviant behavior. So how does this theory apply to this crime? So the main perpetrator, Hiroshi Miyano, was upset that Junko didn't want to go out with him, which resulted in his retaliation and his whole messed up plan. And the theory explains how a person's behavior or attitudes can be negatively or positively influenced due to their surroundings, and the people he was associated with were the Japanese crime organization known as Yakuza, and this gang is still influential, and they are known and feared for their reputation of ruthless brutality. So going back to the article to explain how the theory applies, well, sexual violence is perceived as a learned behavior associated with interpersonal aggression and sexuality as an outcome of social and cultural traditions. So I would assume that him being associated with the gang kind of brought up his actions and him thinking that it was whatever to do this to a girl. Damage of the crime. So most importantly, a life was taken, and the sentences that the boys served didn't reflect the severity of the crime, therefore there could have been more justice done. And I'm sure this affected the parents and everybody in the community. And because of their age, they were protected in the courts and tried as juveniles, and they are now free, and some continued and even went to commit more crimes. So obviously they didn't see how their crime impacted other people, like they didn't really get punished for it. And it was said that Junko's mom had a mental breakdown which resulted in her needing psychiatric treatment. So obviously there was emotional trauma to family, friends, and even the community. Another thing would be a distrust in law enforcement because they did not take precautionary steps and follow the proper procedures. When they went to the house where she was, they didn't actually go in and search like they should have, which is also damaging to people because, I mean, police should do their job.
It is hard to say how we could prevent a crime like this because of the amount of things she endured. For instance, she was first abducted, raped, tortured, and finally killed. Not only this, but she endured trauma inflicted on her by the Yakuza, one of the largest gangs in the world, but they are still legal because the Japanese government believes they're a necessary evil. Anyways, one thing that can happen to prevent what happened to Ferrata to anyone else is not allowing the Yakuza to hurt citizens not from their world. This is because once her kidnappers abducted her and raped her, they wanted to release her, but they were afraid of the retaliation of the Yakuza because they were low-ranked gang members. Furthermore, Ferrata was raped, and to prevent this, we could encourage not just women but also men to carry pepper spray or learn self-defense, but obviously nothing could prevent rape 100%. Moreover, she was being forced to go to Minato's house where she would be held captive. She would call the police, but she was caught before she could say anything, so nothing happened. The second time the police were called, they showed up to the house and told the parents what was happening and asked if they could look inside, and the parents said yes, which surprised them, so they left without even checking if she was okay. Additionally, not everyone will have been raped or assaulted, but normalizing things like catcalling can lead people to doing more and more things and believing it's okay. In the article Preventing Acquaintance Rape Through Education by Kimberly Losway, she states, "We are too often unwilling to hold men accountable for rape. As a result, women are being held responsible for men's behavior and thus the problem of rape and related issues of rape prevention." Furthermore, we should care about this crime in the Yakuza because the government allows for them to run, and they also participate in crimes like human trafficking. Furthermore, this can happen to someone you know. It has happened several times in the US, not to this extent, but it is dehumanizing, and if they manage to get away, they will be dealing with the trauma from it their whole lives. Not only this, But because they were minors, they were only sentenced for 7 years, except for Hiroshi. But he will still get out when he's 30.